Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Bertha's Legacy podcast. Bertha's Legacy, if you're not familiar with us, is a charity which supports victims of gender-based violence. And what we're hoping to do with our podcast, pretty much as we do with our services, is really to create a space for healing, empowerment, and to create change for victims and survivors of gender-based violence. I'm Zanele, your host today, and I am one of the co-founders of Bertha's Legacy. With me today, we have the lovely Tembi, who is my biological sister, by the way, but also is co-founder with me for Bertha's Legacy. We have Beatrice, who is our content and engagement strategist. She powers us, making sure that we're heading in the right direction. If you just want to give us a wave, Beatrice. And Nikita, who is our social media manager. She generates magic with her content. We love what she does for us. Social media and blogs as well. Okay, Tembi, let us know, what are we going to be getting into?
So today, this is just a few days after Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day typically is that time of the year where lovers, potential lovers, celebrate romantic relationships with gifts of chocolate, expensive dinners, candlelight dinners, flowers. And we just thought it would be an opportune time for us at Bertha's Legacy to explore issues and themes around love should not hurt. So without further ado, I think let's get right into it.
Let's get into it. All right. So we are going to start off by sharing some of our early influences on dating. This is from our salad days when most of us were younger. Some, it's not as long ago. But yeah, do you want to share some of the things that actually shaped what your view was of dating? Tembi.
It was a while ago, quite a while ago. But what I think set the standard for me was, as you remember, mom and dad were quite strict about vetting people coming to pick us up on dates and so forth. And I'd always put that down in my youth as just another rule for mom and dad to stop us from having fun. But any boy who came to the house, and there weren't many, would have to knock on the door, introduce themselves, speak to mom and dad, and let them know that they're taking their daughter out and what time they'll have me home. And I found that pretty much the one or two that did that were the relationships that tended to last and thrive. And one of those was my current husband. So that definitely set the tone. I think it was important from the viewpoint that it was about the potential partner coming and placing value on me as an individual and being accountable for my well-being, as opposed to someone who just hoot at the gate and come and whiz you away without anybody knowing. So that definitely set the standard for how I'd respect myself and expect to be treated.
Right. I actually just had a flashback when you said that of us going out on dates, and back in the day when call boxes were still around, our parents would make sure that we had 20 cents, which was what you needed to make a call, so that if ever you got into any trouble or you got stuck, you had a way to call home for help. So no cell phones. Yeah, that was just a flashback there. That's great. Beatrice, what about you?
My first influence was through media. I am a big cinema fan. And I always found that the protagonists and me did not have a lot in common, because it seemed in the past, but still you see a lot of protagonists who don't seem to have a purpose except for finding love and romantic relationships. And I think this is harmful because it limits representation of women aspirations and reinforce outdated gender rules. Men are often portrayed as ambitious and career-driven, and women, meanwhile, their stories revolve about love, and that is not necessarily true. So that was something that shaped my views of women in relation to relationships, because it doesn't need to be your main goal in life. And since we're talking about dating and relationships, I think it's important to flag that out, that my first representation didn't represent me at all. And that's completely okay. Cinema is changing a little bit. We see more women protagonists. They are now related to romance and relationships. And I think this is a big win for us.
Yeah, that's another topic that we can definitely get into, in the role of media in shaping our views and, on everything, but particularly around relationships. And I think there's definitely work to do in that field, as so many other fields, about positioning women in a different light. What about you, Nikita, who was been dating not as long as ago as the rest of us?
For me, coming from a very strict family, very conservating, where dating was considered a taboo, I grew up with certain expectations about relationships. Largely, they were shaped by how my family behaved and the different dynamics that I got to see while growing up. This is the role of a man, this is the role of a woman, and the woman has to sacrifice this. I saw all those dynamics in my household, and yes, I did not necessarily agree with all of those patterns, but they still set the tone for what I expected from relationships, because you know how when we are teenagers, we get influenced by the people around us, and majorly I was in my house, so my expectations were like, is this going to be my future as well? But I was not really keen on repeating those same dynamics. It still is hard to break free from all those years of conditioning that I have, and I'm slowly letting go of that and trying to tell myself what is normal, what is not normal, what is something that is acceptable to me. My family really shaped the way I looked at relationships. I used to run away, but later on, while growing up, and I met people, when I made friends, that's when I realized love does not have to hurt. Love does not mean that you control somebody. Love does not mean just sacrificing. Love is a lot more than that. Love is more than just spending the nights together and letting the day get by. Just so largely it was shaped by my family, and now I'm opening up.
Yeah, family really they play a big role in those early views. I know, especially for me, mom was an avid reader and she used to read Mills and Boon, romantic. So for those of you that don't know what that is, it was a romance series and a fairly traditional view of a chaste young lady who gets courted and then wooed by a man, and
a manly man.
Yes, absolutely a manly man. And then after the declaration of love is when she uses her cherry. They were normally virgins. So Beatrice, when you talk about the media shaping yours, pretty much maybe because it was a little bit, we didn't have that much exposure to media, right? It was the book, but that definitely, that romantic man coming, sweeping me off my feet, white knight type, respectful savior coming in and fulfilling my romantic dreams. I think also pretty much, as Tembi said, grew up in a household where respect was valued. And so any boy that I dated who I knew I could bring home to mom, that felt like a safe relationship. But, being a kid and wanting to be a rebel and experience other things, right? Like a boy, I did speak to guys who I knew that, oh, I can't bring this one home to mom. Well, that wasn't within their permit. And, there was a little bit of excitement with that. But no, I think at the base of that, right, was the fact that if we can bring them home to mom, then okay, this is a good relationship that's going somewhere. And if you couldn't, then this was just a little bit of fun, which we liked. And, yeah.
An experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. So families definitely had a big, I would agree with you, Nikita. They played a big role in that. Alrighty, so let's get into the heart of our discussion for today. Tembi, you're going to kick us off on some pink and red flags.
Okay, yeah, so I've been tasked with looking at pink and red flags, which basically are just warning signals to look out for and pay heed to. I had to look a lot on social media because things have changed drastically since I was in the dating field. There's loads of examples, so many posts on different types of red flags. But I do realize that I'm speaking to an audience who is going to be quite diverse culturally. So I want to appreciate the fact that, sometimes you're dating or the introduction to the idea of relationships, you might be in a conservative situation where maybe chaperones are the order of the day if you want to get to know a young man as a young lady, or where everything is sort of like monitored. To those who are more liberal, where going out on dates by yourselves by the time you're 15, 16 is quite the norm. And also just understanding that dating as a young person is as much about discovering about yourself as it is about getting to know the other person. When we talk about red flags, I do think that you've got red flags that might indicate that this relationship might not last that long. So obviously, if you're your values are not aligned. For example, he wants a big family and you don't want kids, that could be a red flag, but doesn't mean that you can't enjoy now. Whereas there are other red flags which you definitely need to take more seriously, which could actually end you up in a very serious situation if you don't pay heed to them. So I'm going to try and focus a little bit more on the universal red flags that everybody should pay attention to, that aren't just about preferences, because obviously if it's just preferences, one person's red flag, it's not necessarily the next person's. So the first one I want to talk about, I came across, there's a content creator on YouTube called Jimmy on Relationships. I just need to give him his props because I did sort of like jack from him, and he had a lot that he was talking about. But when he talks about the emotionally unavailable or emotionally immature man, so the kind of person who plays mind games. So definitely red flags to look out for in that instance would be someone who's disrespectful, someone who's aggressive, someone who's confrontational, or who always has to be right, who can't apologize if they are wrong, or who will allow things to escalate, who make sure things will escalate just because they can't win an argument. So those are definitely red flags that I would say look out for. And if you feel something's off, take time to think about where this is going, because it might not just be about incompatibility. It could potentially lead you into a situation where abuse becomes a factor, and we just need to be really careful about that. The other thing that I was looking at in terms of red flags, which I think is one to note, is somebody who's excessively controlling. They'll isolate you from your friends. They want to know where you are all the time. They're constantly blowing up your phone, who you with, what are you wearing, why are you wearing that, so how long have you been away from, you have to pay particular attention to somebody who wants to control every aspect of your being. Again, that's really something that you should not ignore. On the other side, someone who's excessively secretive, like we're having a relationship. We're trying to get to know each other. You want to know about me. I want to know about you. But every time your phone rings, someone who acts a bit dodgy, either ignores phones, won't pick them up in your presence, or has to run off to a corner every time the phone rings. Someone who won't allow you to meet their friends, won't allow you to meet members of their family. You've got to ask yourself, why is this happening? There's a plethora of red flags that you can find on social media, but the one that I think hasn't been talked about that much, and which I think we should all pay attention to, probably the biggest red flag, is you could be the problem. And by that, what I mean is, if you find that you're dating and you're constantly attracting the same kind of either controlling, abusive, jealous man all the time, you need to sit back and take a look at yourself. Quite often, we can be carrying baggage from our past. We can be overlooking unhealed trauma and then just jumping from relationship into relationship and wondering why we're making the same mistakes over and over again. And for someone in that situation, I recommend highly, by the way, our journaling for healing. Because if you're broken, you're not going to be part of a wholesome relationship. And you're setting yourself up for failure. So think about who you are. Are you whole? Are you carrying baggage from way back? Are you broken? Are you perpetuating the same cycle of coming across the same person and expecting that just because it's a new face, things should change? And I think that's a huge red flag that you can look out for. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot more to red flags, but I think those are the basic ones that we can consider.
There's a lot to unpack there, so I'm going to jump in. Okay. I can see we all like, yeah. So I'm going to jump in and go back to a couple of the points that you've made that I think are really key. So one around the controlling behavior. With all of these things, with all of these red flags, right? Everything is within context. And as you said before, depending on, whether you're dating I'm courting, I'm looking for a partner, or I'm just kind of like discovering the things that I like, right? You pay attention to different things. But, around the control, sometimes, because as women, sometimes we tend to romanticize things. And it's really easy to take little things like, oh, he wants to know where I am all the time. Oh, he's so caring. And, we think it's a good thing. when our spidey senses should be like, maybe something not right here. So note to self, as we check these things, obviously some of the things may be about consideration and caring. But, just context, right? It's all data points, and watch for patterns. So when you see these behaviors, this is why we say it's pink flags. They may be early warning signs. As you're navigating through the relationship, pay attention to the patterns and don't romanticize away some things which should be cause for concern. And also, it's not just about how your partner, whoever you're dating treats you. You should be paying attention to how he's treating other people. So when you're out and about and you're on a date, how does he interact with the wait staff? Is he rude? Is he dismissive of them? Is he aggressive? These are all patterns, things that can let you know. And for us who are speaking about, we're in a gender-based violence space. And typically when we're talking about things, it is understanding the things that could lead to a abusive situation. That's the context from which we're speaking. So those are really, really great points that you raised around the controlling behavior, the early warning signs of what may actually result in abusive behavior. Nikita, I know I saw you there. You wanted to jump in. What did you want to share?
No, around controlling only, I just wanted to say that there is also a very subtle hint. There are really subtle signs that you should really look out for, especially at this time, and it's very, very easy for people to be pretentious. There is a very subtle form of passive controlling where you could see people making you feel guilty for doing things that you like to do. There will be people who will make you feel very guilty because just because they don't agree with it, or they don't like it, they will make you feel guilty about it, or they will use their silence to manipulate you about that, or they will make passive aggressive comments on that, and you will feel like, oh, maybe they're just right, but you really have to look at how many times it is being done. You have the key right there is to understand how many times is it happening again and again. Is it just a one-time thing, or are they doing it again? Are they using the silent treatment to keep you in control? Are they emotionally manipulating you? Because this whole act can then be translated into physical act as well. It's very easy to escalate from emotional abuse to physical abuse. So you really need to look out for those red flags, I believe.
100%. I see Beatrice nodding. Do you have anything to add for us, Beatrice?
Yeah, I was going to mention that it escalates when it comes to red flags. Like Tandy mentioned, if they can control their feelings, they might scream at you once, and then next time they will punch the wall, and that will escalate. We know that from data we have from domestic violence. So it never shows fully how it's going to be, but the early signs will give you a good idea of what is coming eventually, because most likely will escalate.
100%. And yeah, some of us have all been guilty of being young and foolish and have the tendency to excuse away some of the behaviors that we actually know are not right and are not acceptable. But yeah, it comes through with knowing yourself as well, knowing what is acceptable for you and what is not, and then paying attention to that as the relationship continues. Okay, so Beatrice, what about you? I know you wanted to talk to us about challenges and expectations in relationships for our youth.
Yes. Before I go that, I will just add something. Nikita mentioned something that is really important, and I just want to touch base that again. Sometimes we treat ourselves in a way that is not how we treat our friends. More often than not, we are much kinder to our friends than to ourselves. It makes sense to ask yourself, if my friend was in this situation, in this relationship, would I be comfortable with that? Because if you're not, putting as a third person, then you might need to review what makes sense for you.
That's a good point.
What I meant by that was that whenever you're stuck in a situation where you don't know whether to go for it or not, whether this person will be ideal for you or not, I came across this point on Instagram and I immediately related to it. So I have made it my, what can I say, to find out whether the partner that I'm with will be my ideal partner or not. I ask myself this one question: the way your partner is behaving with you right now, however it may be good, it may be bad, however they are behaving with you right now, would you be okay if your partner behaves with you like that for the rest of your life? Would you
Yes,
be
okay.
okay with being treated like that? Because the partner that you choose right now as your ideal partner is somebody you're also going to build your future with. You're
Right.
going, it could be just a few years later, or it could be, you're looking for a very long term thing, and you just need to ask yourself this question. If they don't change, if you're just thinking they'll change, what if they don't? Would you be okay with that? Would you be able to live with somebody like that? And if the answer is yes, go ahead with that. But if it is a no, if it is even the slightest doubt in that, you need to rethink.
That's a really great point.
So one of the first things that came on my research when I was researching on youth, because I'm not young anymore, and early relationships, is that unrealistic expectation from media and social media. So if what influenced me was movies, what they are influencing now is through social media. And the challenge is that many young people, they enter relationships expecting grand gestures or instant chemistry. And those things, they don't exist. So I think it's really important to encourage media literacy to help young people differentiate entertainment from reality and promote discussions about realistic relationships, because there are big expectations, especially now when young people, they're exposing themselves so much more. They're content creators and they gamify their life somehow. You see these big accounts with a lot of followers, and that is not what real relationships look like. Behind these accounts, probably there are monetary reasons moving them to do those things, because that brings numbers, that brings views. But in a relationship, the only thing that matters is how you feel in that relationship. It doesn't need to be a spectacle. Another factor is peer pressure and society pressure, because you might see so many people in relationships. You might think that you need to be part of the circle of people and live that experience. But that experience will come when it's the right time, and you should do at your own pace.
I absolutely agree with Beatrice, especially around the portrayal of relationships on social media. I just don't know how I would deal if I had to interact or date under these circumstances. And then it puts a lot of pressure. So the girls are under pressure because they have, for them to maintain their status or credibility with their friends, they have to show that I'm loved. He got me a Hermes bag. He got me the designer this. And a lot of things are just it's so ridiculous. And then you put pressure on whoever's doing that for you to get a return on their investment, basically. Like, what am I getting from treating you like a princess, from buying you all these expensive things? And then you open the door to the possibility of, now I'm angry because I didn't get what I should have gotten for what I gave you. And you've totally lost the whole purpose of the relationship, which should have been the relationship. And it's all about more the perception of the relationship than actually, what's going on behind closed doors. So social media definitely has a lot to answer for. And I don't know what the answer is with that, really. I don't know if people can be open enough nowadays to have those honest conversations about how real relationships work, because it's not what is going to bring in the clicks and the views and the likes and the subscriptions and the money. That's a dilemma there.
Yeah, I also believe here, if I have to add about young people on social media right now, the subtle pressure of posting your partner constantly on the social media. Oh, if I don't post my partner, people won't validate my why do you need others to validate that relationship? I mean, I am all up for open, keeping your relationship public also, that everybody knows that you're in a relationship. But there's a thing about privacy. There's a thing about there should be privacy, not secrecy when it comes to relationship.
Right.
That's what I believe in. And nowadays people post a lot of stories with their partners, and they're like, cute couple, this couple, that couple. And that really sets a lot of expectations, especially on the men's side, if I'm going over there, because we as women, we tend to get swooned. Oh, my partner just posted me online, I feel so happy. And if the partner does not post you, there is a lot of, I don't know, you feel sad that he didn't post me. But you don't understand that not everybody is same. Not everybody expresses love in the same way that others are doing. You need to communicate that. You need to communicate about your love language. And you also need to look at yourself. Like Thembi said in the earlier conversation, you also need to look at yourself. You could be a red flag too. Your insecurities, your traumas can really shape everything. We could get defensive. We could even push other people away without even meaning to. You could disrupt a very beautiful relationship just because of the societal expectation, because of your peer pressure. I mean, this is the time when you need to introspect. You need to look at yourself. You need to understand what you need, and you need to communicate those needs at that time. And here's where our course also helps a lot, journaling for healing, because then you are looking at yourself, you're working on yourself, and you make those boundaries for yourself. What you need, what you don't need, why those things are happening.
Yeah, I honestly don't know if I would be able to date in this time frame where social media is putting so much pressure on the youth. I'm looking at the promposals and the extravagance that goes into that, and I'm wondering about what is the cost, also the financial cost. Like these are young people. Where are you supposed to be getting the money to be flossing and making these big gestures from? And I think it's got to be really hard because at the base of it, right, we're social creatures and we understand, especially for our teens, conforming, right? We talk about finding your tribe. You want to be like everyone else. Standing out is not always a good thing. Our self-worth, which it comes back to, a lot of that is fed by the validation that we get from our peers. And so there is a lot of pressure to, if everybody else is dating, I should also be in a relationship. If keeping up with the Joneses on the 1,000th level, right? And I don't know. I think it would be hard. Big up to the youth who are actually having to navigate and challenge that. But yeah, central again to this discussion, I think we're coming back to what Tembi said earlier around understanding yourself, around having a well-developed sense of self, being able to ask yourself the question in relationships, how does this feel? Do I like this? I'm aligning this against my spirit. Does this sit well with my spirit or not? Is this behavior acceptable for me or not? Setting boundaries and consent, which I think, is, something maybe, can we talk about that? How do we do that? Because we know there is need in relationship to have any healthy relationship to be able to, one, understand what it is that works for you and what doesn't. And so, Nikita, part of what, to jump on what you were saying earlier, when you're asking yourself this behavior which is being displayed, am I okay with it now? Will I be okay with it in 5, 10, 20 years? Is if it doesn't change. Knowing what the answer is, right, for that, or discovering the things that don't feel right. We're going out and he's put his arm around me. Am I comfortable in public with him putting his arm around me? Am I comfortable enough to tell him, you know what, actually, I don't like that. That doesn't feel right. Please don't do that. Will he respect? Am I comfortable enough to demand that he respects the boundaries that I set without making me feel guilty about it? Using some other tool to manipulate me as though what I'm asking for myself is deficient or unreasonable or unachievable. So, this consent and boundary settings and having a well-developed sense of self before you embark or try to embark on a relationship, whether it be romantic or even with your friends, right? How you interact with people. That is so key, so central to healthy relationships as well.
Can I just add something here for our listeners, especially that I just want to say that you're not a loser if you're not dating. You're not. It's
Yes.
completely okay. And you're not bad for dating either. It's completely all right. You're nowhere wrong to date or not date. Yeah, the society can make us feel like there's a wrong or right timeline for relationships. Like Beatrice also said, there's not fixed timeline. There's no one size fits all when it comes to love, life, or timing. You can, whether you're single or in a relationship, it's all about what makes you happy, what makes you feel fulfilled, and whether you're at peace or not. If it's not peace, you need to think within what will bring you peace. That's all. You're not a loser, you're not a winner either. You don't need to boast.
That's such an
Yeah,
important point. You're not in competition with anyone. It's just about being your authentic self. Alrighty, so after all that heavy discussion, let's get it back into a little bit of lighthearted stuff. So we're going to end up with talking about some red flag, green flags. So, each one of us can share a red flag or a green flag that we've experienced in our dating lives. And I can start. I'm going to start us off on a positive note, a green flag taken from personal experience. So when I was dating my husband, we actually met online and we got married within 3 months of meeting online. I know, pretty quick and whatnot, but we knew, and we were older and I was wiser. But on our first in-person meeting, we met at a mall, and as we were going around, there was a child who staring at him, and after asking the mothers permission, he crouched down and had an interaction with the child, and it was just so sweet. And it actually was an indication of the sort of person that he was. I did for a moment think, is he putting it on? Can anybody really be like this? But he generally just was somebody who paid attention to little things and was thoughtful. So in this instance, that actually was a green flag of someone who is thoughtful, sensitive, attentive.
Yeah, that story actually reminds me of, there's a lady, I wish I remembered her name. If I do, I'll post it or something. But she's basically a content creator who speaks about being single, power to, being single and child-free. And she's very skeptical about men and their intentions. But your husband was wonderful. He was absolutely wonderful husband for all of his life. But she says there is a suspiciously high number of men posting cat video on YouTube. So I don't know if anybody who listens or watches has come across men being cute and cuddling their cats and just showing what wonderful, sensitive guys they are. But I think this is in response to knowing that this is how you work your way into a woman's heart, by being sensitive, by showing affection and that kind of thing. That would have been a red flag. If that's true.
At this point, I feel the responsible thing to say is, let's watch for patterns, people. Let's watch for patterns, because we all know that when we're starting to date, everybody sends their ambassador. It may not necessarily be them. They send their representative. But after time, right, the truth comes out. So, if you watch for the patterns, the things that aren't genuine won't continue to happen. They won't consistently happen.
One of my boys somebody must have posted that the recruitment costs are not the same as the operational costs. When you're recruiting, you put on a big banner and a huge budget, but now operational costs, it's a different.
So number one, stick around for the operational costs, right? So that you can see and note the differences.
Okay, now I'm going to share now, because you started off with such a lovely green flag. I'm going to share a horror story. It wasn't my personal experience, but it's a story that I heard of quite early on in my, when I was a teenager. And I think it was shared by Andrea Dawkins, who, God rest her soul, she's passed now, but she's one of the militant feminists. And she wasn't liked by the typical, what you imagine a feminist to be in terms of what men think feminist is. Butch and all that kind of thing. She portrayed that, but she'd had a really tough life apparently. And I don't know whether this was her experience or something that she'd heard, but she talked about a 18-year-old girl in high school. Is that 17, 18?
Yeah, I think that's
high school anyway, who had a crush, as you do at that age, on the captain of the football team or something. And whether she wasn't part of the in crowd and this guy was just playing a a prank on her, or he just felt like being malicious. He invited her to watch a movie, and she was excited. They went to watch a movie, bought the drinks and the sweets and a big bucket of popcorn to share. Romantic, cute, right? While they're watching the movie. But unbeknownst to her, this guy had cut a hole in the bottom of the bucket of popcorn and placed it on his lap and threaded his appendage through the bottom. So you can imagine, as they're sharing the popcorn, honestly, that was just horrible. And that just stuck with me, like, who does that?
Just scarred me for life.
Yeah. You were innocently thinking that this is the date of your dreams, and then you hit the bottom of the popcorn, or maybe not even the bottom, because that's like, I don't know how that works. But you find, it's not popcorn. But that was a horror story, a red flag, if ever there was one. And I hope nobody else has really experienced that. So, yeah.
Note to self, order own popcorn at movies. What about you, Nikita?
I think I just want to add here how pornography also adds to these kind of things that people often do. I mean, it's certainly not just one case that has happened. I think that it's very easy to get by doing these things, and others will be comfortable with it or will join in. It's very fun. It could really, coming back to how B said, unrealistic expectations because of social media. There are things that people try and they say, ki, this is just experiment, you can say. We're just trying it out if she's into it or not, and then you do things like this. It's just not acceptable. So you need to monitor what you're watching.
And I think, Nikita, it's you remind me when you mentioned the issue of pornography, and I think that's a whole podcast and a discussion on its own, the influence it has.
Definitely.
But this lady I was talking about, this Andrea Dawkins, she was actually very famous or popular for her stance, her militant fight. She was a writer and an avid campaigner against pornography, because she did say that this was literally the training ground for rapists. And
Exactly.
I think a lot of people, young men, unfortunately, suffer as a result. And it can become, obviously I can't relate, but apparently it can be really addictive. And that's obviously going to shape a lot of how their interactions are going to be with women, and then lead to problems. But I think that's a huge topic on its own, pornography.
There are a lot of things around it if we ever cover that in our new podcast, but there are multiple layers to it. It not only sets unrealistic expectations, but it also creates insecurities in you. Why am I not able to perform in this way? Why am I not able to do that? But there are lots of layers on it. I mean,
Yeah.
too much to cover on that.
Right. So back to you sharing your red flag, green flag.
My red flag, green flag would be, I'll share a green flag. So my first relationship, it was the way my partner always respected my boundaries, how they always asked for my consent, be it anything. I'm not a fan of gifts. I don't like receiving materialistic gifts, and I communicated that with them around my birthday, and they not only accepted it, but instead of making me feel guilty about it, they used other acts of service, like using words of affirmation, just making me feel good about my day, appreciating my presence and all. And they really respected what I was comfortable with and what I was not comfortable with. I was also not very comfortable with a lot of physical gestures. So whenever we would be around each other, he would always ask me whether I'm okay with something, whether I'm okay with holding hands, whether I'm okay with hugging, whether I was even okay to sit beside each other. He would always ask me. And that was a huge green flag for me.
Swooning. That's amazing.
The thing is, that experience set a big standard for me for my future. It was like, I deserve this. I deserve this kind of person in my life who understands what I need, who understands what I want, who understands my space very respectfully. Not pushing me towards anything, not asking me again and again why I don't want this, or, aggressively making me do things that I'm not comfortable with. So that was my green flag.
Nice. How about you, Beatrice?
I want to add to Tam's story. I think it comes a lot from how we are raised. the idea that boys will be boys sort of thing, and then this type of thing is very serious because we know from previous stories, and unfortunately more to come, that many times the victim will hear something like, oh, you shouldn't report, you're gonna end this young man's life because such a silly prank. It is not silly, it is not a prank, it's abuse, isn't it? So it's quite important to challenge the gender stereotypes as well when we are talking about relationships, because a lot of them are very harmful for both parties involved.
Right, and not to trivialize that kind of behavior. Absolutely. Because it's not.
Yeah, it basically comes from the idea that you are allowed to invade of other people's, privacy body, that you're allowed to do that. Who allowed you? It's culture, is, as Nikita says, because of porn, because sex became something so simplified, so such easy access. But for the victim, that's not funny. That's not funny at all. I want to talk about age gaps, especially, so red flag, especially when it comes with power imbalance, such as teacher and student relationships. They can create unhealthy dynamics. When you're young, I suppose, that difference is not very clear. But with experience, with time, it will make easier to recognize patterns of abuse, basically, in these relationships. What might seem like admiration of care can sometimes be a form of control of this person over you, It's always important to remember that the responsibility in this kind of situations falls on the adult person. There is no such thing as a sexual or romantic relationship between a teacher and a student. That's called grooming, and is a process that is created to gradually build trust and manipulate the victims to maintain secrecy and their control. So I want to talk about that because it happens. We know it happens. And when you are young, you will think, oh no, he likes me because I'm different, because I'm mature. It doesn't work this way. Actually, it's abuse, and the name is grooming. If they are asking for secrecy, it's because they know it's a crime.
Right. Yeah. Very, very important point. Very, very important topic. And I hate that we've basically run out of time, what we had scheduled for. But I think if I was to summarize the discussion today, talking about love not hurting and, what are healthy relationships, I think I'd summarize, just in a few points. It starts with you. Know yourself, know what you want, know what you don't want, know what you deserve, right? Don't be afraid to set your boundaries and to demand respect and to demand things that will make you comfortable from your partner. You do this for your partner's protection and your protection as well, right? Because you don't want to be the one spilling out your trauma or your insecurities or your hurts onto the next person. And then, number two, within the consent and boundaries and understanding what works for you and what doesn't. And as you're going through that journey to learn that, watch out for the patterns, watch out for the red flags, and watch out for the pink flags, which turn into red flags. We've talked about things that escalate over time. And one person may start out one way, they may end up another way. So as you go through that process, take everything into context and watch for the patterns, because people's true selves do reveal themselves. And I think maybe back to Nikita's point around the things that you're seeing now, how would you feel if you're seeing the same things in 5, 10, 20 years? That's a good gauge for you to be able to set boundaries around what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Good luck to those who are out in the dating field, because we know that, it's a minefield, the pressure to keep up with what everybody else is doing, not to be a misfit. We understand that the pressure from that is real. Peer pressure and, wanting to conform, we understand that it's real. So honestly, I wish you good luck. I would encourage you to journal so that you can understand who you are and what it is that you need. And I wish you loving, happy, healthy relationships. Thanks for spending time with us, and hopefully we'll see you all in the next episode. Thanks.